Hello, Dreamcatchers, and welcome to the Writers Haven Show. I am your host, V. Helena, and today in studio, I'm here with artist extraordinaire, Tony Spencer. Tony is a phenomenal artist who is very talented in many art forms, including songwriting, poetry, and he's an incredible painter. He's had an extraordinary, outstanding career as a community leader in the state of Maryland, and I'm excited to have him here to talk about his three artist P's: passion, process, and projects. Please join me in welcoming Tony to the Writers Haven. Hello, Tony.
Hello, B. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad we finally got you in
The right time.
to the Haven. So as I was telling our audience, I mean, you are so incredibly talented in so many areas of art, you know, with your poetry, with your paintings, your songwriting, and I really want to talk about all of those things.
Okay.
But what did you find to be your initial attraction into art? What art form was
Singing.
singing?
I come from a very powerful family of singers. The artists between the Maryland, D.C. area will know David E. Smith. We come from the same line. David lives in Baltimore, and our families were just very musical. Singing, playing instruments, both, acting. So
And did you write your own music?
initially with the group I sang with in 1968 called the Gospel Serenaders, we were writing all of our songs then. And what Andre Crouch was doing on the national level, our group, the Gospel Serenaders, did locally.
Okay, so your artistry started with music,
Yes.
songwriting being a part of that, and you started at 14 years old.
Actually, I started at 12 of gospel music. The gospel, the Soul Stirrers, the harmonizing four out of Richmond, Virginia. Okay, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, James Cleveland. Started with that at 12 years old, going to hear these concerts, and then at 14, singing at a club in Glen Burnie called Dotson's Lounge, which is about 10 miles south of Baltimore. Whenever a major artist came through Baltimore, D.C., they would stop at Dotson's. And the first artist, I didn't know him then, didn't know how powerful he was the Jimmy Smith Trio.
Okay.
We're singing James Brown's trio song, I Feel Good, and he and his combo just starts kicking. I didn't know who they were until years later, but it was Jimmy Smith's trio.
Now, aside from being a vocal artist, did you play instruments? Did I hear you say that?
I played about 7 instruments between elementary and junior high school. I played trumpet in the 4th grade, baritone in the 5th, sousaphone, French horn, and tuba in the 6th. And I was glad I got away from my elementary music teacher, Mr. Thomas Whit Williams. But he had already sent my name to the middle school, junior high school. So in walks Mr. Cecil Martin. Is Tony Spencer in this class? Science class. He's right there. Mr. Williams said you would be an excellent saxophone player. And what I didn't understand from that process, I was thinking that because I was moving from different instruments, I wasn't doing well.
Oh, okay. So you moved. You ended
The
up
teacher
playing
moved me around
7.
because I could adapt very quickly, and most other students couldn't. And that's
Okay.
why he told my middle school teacher that I could be a good saxophone player. So I played tenor saxophone in the 7th and 8th grades, and then the baritone sax in the 9th grade. But this is where parents need to guide their children. I was self-motivated. In the 9th grade, because I started singing, I thought, I don't need the music now. That was the biggest mistake. Someone needed to tell me, no, that's part of your journey. And I stopped playing music because singing was my major passion at that point. So recording at 14 years old in the middle school, you're a local celebrity. I thought the music was behind me. No, I should have learned how to hold on to it to be a part of the package.
You mean in terms of being a musician?
In terms of being a musician, yes.
So, but you continued in music as
Yes.
a songwriter
Yes,
and as a lyricist.
yes.
And that also segued into other parts of your artful journey.
Yes.
So, so the songwriting started. Was poetry the next thing in line?
Poetry,
for
well,
you?
the poetry didn't start until I was 16. That was after I started singing with a group called the Gospel Serenaders out of Pasadena, Maryland. And with that, all the guys wrote songs, and musicians just picked up. You just started singing a song, they started writing, they started playing. So my first was a poem. First one was a poem. And
do you remember what form? Was it haiku? Was it tanka?
no,
Was it,
this
I know,
was
going way back in the archives to try to remember.
yeah, boy, this was God Will Provide.
Okay.
There's a song called God Will Provide. And my cousin just played this rhythm on the lead guitar. And with the rhythm, the lyrics just came with some music. Sometimes the music came Sometimes the lyrics came. Sometimes they came together. But with the three of us, my cousin Ernest, Curtis, and myself, we were the main songwriters. And our manager, Kenneth Anderson, he once sang for the Travelers locally out of Annapolis, and also with the Reverend Julius Cheeks and the Sensational Nightingales. But when he came off the road with Reverend Cheeks, he was looking for a local group to manage, and we needed a manager. And so we sang at his home church, and that Sunday he asked us, could he manage us? He was a brilliant man. He ended up being my brother-in-law, but he was a brilliant man. He could write songs, he could think, and he kind of transferred that training to us to believe that we all can do the same thing.
Okay, so your musical journey started at 12 years old.
Yeah.
And you were playing instruments. You ended up playing 7 instruments.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, formal, I could play about 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
Music and bass guitar and lead guitar.
Okay,
yeah.
Which led you into also songwriting.
Yes.
And then you started to dabble in poetry.
The poetry started at 16. Yes.
Yeah, because isn't there, a lot of similarities in writing music, lyrics, as well as poetry? Aren't there similarities in producing the two?
But just think about some of the songwriters, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. Stevie's especially, that doesn't always rhyme, but it has this deep meaning. And I think the easiest for me was to have something that rhymed. I thought that was poetry. But some of the deepest poetry has no rhyme.
Yeah, like Tupac.
Like Tupac.
A lot of people don't realize that he was a poet, as well as
Yes.
many people know him as an artist, as a rapper. But he wrote some very, very deep poetry many times, most of it free verse, none of it really rhyming, none of it really conforming into any real traditional poetry. That's why it's called free verse. But okay, I got you. So the poetry, now that's something that you started at a young age that you continue to do today. And I also know that there's some poetry that you've done that has really been therapeutic for you.
Yes.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
There was one poem I wrote when I was in the Marine Corps. And January of 1971, I was a single man, had a car, had a job, had a girlfriend, didn't have too much responsibility. By October of that same year, I was married, had twin daughters. I was in the Marine Corps, and what I made as a single man, I was making half that as a Marine with a family. And I got very depressed. And so here comes the chaplain who's going to talk to our 4 platoons. And he makes a joke starting off. If you're single, stay that way. If you're married, it's just too late for you. Well, he was joking. I was not in the frame of mind to hear that. So I went back and wrote.
You were like in your 20s.
I was 20.
20.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm thinking, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and I figured there was no use talking to him. So I wrote this poem that was in a very dark place and wrote it home to my wife. And I told, but the morning that some tragic things were going to happen, decided to call my wife, because that day, instead of staying as an infantry, I was a machine gunner during the Vietnam era. I was becoming an honor guard for Nixon. I had been selected and cleared through boot camp and the background check and all that, and White House and top secret clearance. And that day when I called her to tell her not to open the mail, when you get it, just tear it up, it was this poem that's on my CD that I'm singing the song What's Going On, and then I break to recite this poem.
Okay, and I'm going to show our dream catchers the CD. The name of it is It's Time by Tony Spencer. And this is a collection of cover songs that you're singing. And the songs that you chose, I'm assuming, are very significant in theme.
Very significant because of the African American men who wrote these songs. Not only did music come through their lips, but their experience. If it wasn't their experience, they knew how to convey the experiences of their culture. Nat King Cole, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Peabo Bryson, Al Jarreau. All these men, it's a couple more also, but my mind is blank right now. A couple more, that their lyrics touched you. They had body, they had Indians, African Americans and Native Americans would say that their words had iron. It means they had strength, they had meaning. And with that, you knew that what they said wasn't just for that moment. Someone's experience came through this, and now you can identify with it because you had an experience like that as well.
Right.
You now understand that it's not just your experience, and so you have something now that you understand it's universal. And because of your gift or your gifts, you have a responsibility. I'll say we talk about poetry. Poets are the conscience of society. And with that, they have a responsibility to speak. No matter if someone likes it or not, you have to speak it. It's like a burning fire deep inside of your soul. If you don't say it, it's going to haunt you because you know that is on you.
So the collection is kind of a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Because, and that's why you actually put the poem, you
Yes.
kept that poem. You were in a dark
Yes.
place,
Yes.
but you used that experience and you chose very thoughtfully and intentionally the songs that you were going to record
Yes.
For this CD to just say, listen, even though I was in a not so good place, I have these brothers surrounding me, strengthening me with the songs, with the words, with the lyrics that are true to any experience, particularly a man's experience, an African American man's experience in this world, but they're uplifting and they helped you to rise above that place that you were in.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just doing this kind of chronological experience of Mr. Tony Spencer. Okay, so we have the musician, the songwriter. You talked about poetry.
Right.
Let's talk about your paintings.
Okay.
And when did you start with your painting journey, your painter's journey?
I initially started in the 10th grade at Northeast High School, Mrs. Scott, and she gave us all an opportunity to do projects. And we had to pair it with someone. So my partner and I decided to do combinations of a certain type of animals, okay, silhouettes. Each animal in each position was a different color. And so to say a person's silhouette, that was the very first one, that each color represented the person walking in a different time of day, a different stage of their life, different meaning. And so with that, the next one was a crayfish. Same thing, using different colors. Some of the colors were anywhere from yellow to a light green to an orange to a sienna to a blue, a purple, a pink. And when they blend all together, the colors looks like a person's actually walking. Okay, but you have to be able to see that. So it takes vision. Okay, and you can teach a person about what vision is, and they can find their own note. That's the whole thing. Don't do what I'm doing, but hopefully I can inspire you for you to find your own voice, as August Wilson, the black playwright, said. Finding your own voice. And so the examples around me were always of men who had to work from the dirt up.
Okay.
Father was a longshoreman. My grandfather was a longshoreman. My mother was a domestic. And those who in the community who graduated from high school and went to the army or whatever, or college, it was like they had become president. I'm from a rural community in Glen Burnie. And you were raised around people who had so much dignity, and what you saw then you didn't understand. They may not always explain what they said, but they said it to you for you to think about.
Right.
Okay? And
generation.
the entire community watched out for you. The entire community. When it says it takes a village, that's not the actual saying. It takes an entire village to raise a child. And if I did something on this side of the community before I got home, my mother
They
knew
would
about
know
it.
about it.
Yes,
Would
or
know about
if not, they would tell you to go home and tell your mother, and you better tell your mother. Okay?
Right.
So.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about your history and the legacy there when we talk about the quilts.
Okay.
But as far as, just to kind of close out your artistry and in terms of your process for writing and for creating art in the form of paintings, how do you approach those processes? Is it the same for each art form, or is it different depending upon what it is that you're creating?
The word passion. I can't, when I sing, I'm still an introvert. People don't buy that, but in this society, being an African American man, raised up in Anne Arundel County, again, Maryland, you had to learn to be a chameleon. You have to operate in different places. You're not just in just this one setting. No. And so we've gotten to desegregation. You were learning now a different level, but you had to understand that if you wanted something, you couldn't be the introvert. You had now to adapt to that environment if you wanted something and go for it. So process, for me, it starts with passion. It could be just one word. It could be when you were letting the kids do what they were doing. That was passion from the standpoint of you encouraging them. Them hearing one word from each of us today is going to stay with them the rest of their lives. This experience today with the children is going to stay with them the rest of their lives. Some may value it to take on to the same profession as you're doing, or just understand that their epiphany would come, that I saw that, and they said this one word about something, and that's me.
But when you're creating,
Yes.
and let's take your paintings for example, because I've seen a lot of your work.
Okay.
What is it that ignites you to the point of actually creating this vision that I'm assuming maybe started in your head and now you're putting it to on a canvas?
Okay.
What is it? How does that process work? I know it's fascinating to me. I've heard different people with as unique as the person that's telling me about their approach and their process to creating. What is it that gets that going for you?
Well, I tried something that I thought would work for me, and that was writing things down and making a copy of it. Some people that works great for. I did that with a 5 or 7 piece of paper, showed my wife and daughter. These are abstract African instruments. Didn't exist. Made a keyboard look like a piano, but it wasn't a piano. And when I really got the process started, I actually started the painting upside down, spraying with a spray can of paint, and then when I turned it right side up, they were warriors. And the piano became a bridge. And I was going through another dark period. And that's one thing about the passion and the process. Sometimes we think that everyone's happy and elated. No. My work starts when I'm at my lowest. And that's when I can hear it better. I can speak to it better. Sometimes when everything is going well, you don't have any inspiration. Let something hurt you. Find a way to redirect it, or be eaten by it. If you be eaten by it, you can't offer your gift. But take what has hurt you, what has been a journey for you, what has been a trial for you. The leaf was green 2 weeks ago, and now it's brown. It was in the tree, now it's on the ground. It had a process of going from the tree to the ground. Which part of that journey did you catch?
So it's a therapeutic.
It's very therapeutic. Yes.
Process.
You work your way out of that. And if you don't do it for yourself, find some way to help someone else. But through that would also inspire you. So that's what has been around me. I was wise enough in the 20s to understand that I was always placed in the midst of older men. And I had to learn from them, and they offered the information freely. And in some things they said to me freely, my father was saying in such a harsh way, I didn't get it. And I thought he was just being mean. No, he was saying it in a way that the street talked. So when you met it, I heard this from my father.
And so taking in those types of experience helped you to create.
Helped me to create, yes. And to share. And so sometimes it comes out in painting. Sometimes it comes out in poetry. Sometimes it comes out in singing. Sometimes you just have to write. And you write and just write and write. And then sometimes I do, when I rehearse for a concert, I'll do 10% of the rehearsal singing. 90% is here. Is here. And nobody, I could sit in the midst of everyone talking and I'm doing something else. But that's my way.
Awesome. This is so awesome.
Everyone has a process.
And there's no cookie cutter way of approaching it. And so, and every time I hear someone's experience and how they go through it, I'm just amazed at how it's done. Now let's spend a few moments to talk about your family history and legacy and your project. And we're actually going to show a picture, put a picture up of your quilt while you're telling us how that came to be.
Very good friend of ours named Dr. Joan Gaither. She was a professor at MICA, the Maryland Institute of Commercial Art. And
very prestigious school.
Very prestigious school. And she, my wife Vivian, and some other friends belong to the Northern Arundel Cultural Preservation Society. The acronym is NACAPS. And they started in St. Mark United Methodist Church in Hanover. And just as a group of folks just doing family quilts. And then the more it started happening, they realized, gracious, people have these great stories of not just free blacks to 1850s. That's how they started doing theirs. When they met me, my great-great-grandfather founded a community called Freetown in Anne Arundel in 1840.
But this was like maybe the first
It wasn't it was one of the first
on
free.
maybe on the East Coast, maybe.
Not on the East Coast, no. But to go back to 1845, and these people were already free. Okay, you had as many free Native African Americans as you did slaves in Anne Arundel County. Annapolis probably had the largest number of free African Americans, but Anne Arundel County was second to that. And Freetown, Glen Burnie, the area we call Queenstown, Harmons, Humphrey, Arnold, there's different communities throughout Anne Arundel, Browns Woods, they all have free blacks. And because of the culture of that, their faith and their religion brought people together from other parts of the county. The camp meetings, things like that. If you were not Methodist Episcopal, it wasn't United Methodist then, it was Methodist Episcopal. And so that brought people together. But my great-great-grandfather was one of many people, I would say many people, of the black men who stuck together. Sometimes he bought his first tract of land. It was 56 acres in 1845, December 26.
And you were able to go back and trace your family
Yes,
history?
because my wife tells me that we're a family of griots, and I think she says she thinks it's in our DNA. I understand it from the standpoint that I can remember things back when I was 2 years old. And people say, no, you can't, and I can tell them the color of a car or what they were wearing. I can still do that. My aunt would tell us stories about not only Jane Spencer's side of the family, but also I'm related to Matthew Henson and Josiah Henson. Okay.
So how? And I hate to cut you off, but we're running out of
I
time,
understand.
and I definitely want to just have our dream catchers hear. How did you come to creating this quilt and the significance of it?
Okay. Dr. Joan Gaither, she was helping people create their own quilts. She said, Tony, you got to do your quilt. When you're going to do your quilt? So she sat me down. What did James Spencer do? Well, he was a farmer. He was a man of faith. He was an entrepreneur. Okay, all these different things he did. And he was a community trustee, someone who looked out not just for his immediate family, but for, he lived in Glen Burnie, but yet he bought land with 5 other men in another part of the county. On the quilt, it shows the 9 sons and 3 daughters that James Spencer had. But we could only find information from 4 out of the 12. And then I got 227 pictures, and Vivian got some, and so family gave us pictures. And so we created the story from the lineage, from James and Harriet Spencer. And so by doing that and doing Vivian and I do what we call sculpting, we'll take what you have right there and put maybe a batting under it and sew around it. She would do the chickens and the fruits and vegetables, and I would do the eagle and something else. But anyway, we've done quite a bit of quilts with Dr. Joan Gaither.
And the quilts have basically been part of a tour.
They've been part of the Harlem Renaissance, African American women. Okay, just the African American struggle, okay, is on the quilt. And Dr. Joan Gaither would ask you a question and then ask another question because your answer is going to lead to another answer. And so the quilt came about as a result of her asking us questions. Things that you know are there, but you haven't thought about it. You haven't considered putting that down on paper. How many people in our audience today, in your listening audience, know their family passed their grandparents? Sometimes not many.
Yeah.
Or they might think about a great.
But it's so important.
It's so important because we're connected. Ancestry.com is very important. People don't want, they say they want to know their history, but some folks, parents have not told them all of this life story because their parents have had some history they don't like to talk about. We all do. But it's important that we know who we are and where we come from. African American folk came from rich heritage. We didn't come here as people who didn't know how to speak. We came from societies.
So you researched your family history.
Yes. And
you were able to basically tell a story about your heritage, about the legacy of your great-grandfather?
My great-great-grandfather.
Great-great-grandfather.
Yes.
And it's taking a tour now. There are a lot of people who are very interested in it. I know before I even met you years ago, I had been hearing so many great things about you and your family and the legacy, and to finally get a chance to talk to you and meet you and to share some of the accomplishments, you know, when you were at the museum and that you had your quilt on display, and just hearing so many people who know of your people, know of Freetown, was just great to witness and to be a part of. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And it's in keeping with basically your DNA of being a storyteller, whether it's through music, whether it's through poetry, and your quilt. And I think you have a book coming out. Is that a project? That's a memoir?
I have one that's very close.
Okay.
And it's really about 2 articles I wrote about my great-great-grandfather. The first was in 2004 for the Anne Arundel County Historical Society. That was about his will, what he left his wife and his children. And then in 2006, I wrote about his land deeds. Chris Haley, the nephew to Alex Haley, works for the state archives. And at that time, it just so happened that he had a grant and allowed him to have researchers, and they helped me find the land deeds of my great-great-grandfathers and some of his sons. And so it was an eye-opener of how much we have done. And think about what we're doing today and what we're trying to accomplish and what our folks did back in the 1800s during slavery when our people were free, and how much they got done. So it speaks to the urgency of how we need to get ourselves in gear and not clawing each other. See, we've been taught that, but we have to change that. We have much to do, and we have much to offer. So if folks they want our offerings, we should use them, exploit them. But we need to use that for our own communities to rebuild our community. Yes.
Well, Tony, thank you so very much for coming on the Writers Haven Show. I really, really appreciate you sharing your artistry and your family history with us. You'll have to come back when your memoir is finished so we can really get into more detail about your family history. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Dreamcatchers, I know you enjoyed this episode of the Writers Haven Show. And if you're in the area, check out Tony's quilts on display in the Anne Arundel County area and throughout the state of Maryland. For more information about the show, visit us at www.writershavenshow.com. And remember to connect with me socially on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram at Author V. Helena and the Writers Haven Show. And you can stream the show on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Sonos, SoundCloud, Alexa, and Spreaker by visiting our Writers Haven Show with V. Helena channels. Subscribe to all of our channels and you'll never miss a show. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, catch fire on purpose. Dreamcatchers, welcome to another exciting season of the Writers Haven Show. I'm V. Helena, your host and executive producer. The Writers Haven Show was created to showcase the passion, process, and projects of writers of literature, television, and film. In our 3rd season, we've expanded our programming to include songwriters. We hope to inspire and motivate you with this season's lineup of artists. Stream our shows on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, iTunes, Sonos, SoundCloud, Spotify, Alexa, and YouTube. We drop new episodes every week, so subscribe and never miss a show. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr at Author V. Helena, and visit our website at www.writershavenshow.com. See you in the Haven, and until next time, catch fire on purpose.